good afternoon or good morning. It's a real honor for me to be talking about cartooning here in the Free Library of Philadelphia. I got my start here in the second floor photo room, where I'd come and rifle through the photographs looking for material to draw for my cartoons. As you will hear, I believe that good reference material makes for good cartooning. This was, of course, way back in the last millennium when with people advised young women what to do, they would say, become a typist. I almost got it right. I became a stereotypist. And the topic of my talk today is in defense of stereotypes. Now, we cartoonists stereotype everything, but so does everyone else. A stereotype is just an image that comes to represent a group or a thing, and they aren't all negative. For example, if I were to caricature a typical Philadelphia TEDx audience member, and I drew that person as extremely attractive, very well dressed, and highly intelligent, not to mention creative, would anyone here object? I didn't think so. Well, a cartoonist's job is to keep the images and the stereotypes fresh, and it's harder than you might think. I'll just give you a test case. Imagine what if you had to create an image of a modern Native American, and you had to do it without using any of these images. Any ideas? Well, this is how my very creative young colleague, Matt Boers, did it. Non-white babies now outnumber white babies in America for the first time. Second, this cartoon went viral not only because it was a brilliant comment on the changing demographics of America, but it was also a fresh and very different look at what Native Americans today might look like. This is a group which, as you all know, these are what the stereotypes often look like. And when you compare them with what Matt did, they become even older, more out of date, and objectionable. So how do we keep things fresh? Well, we keep our eyes open. Part of creativity is just paying attention. One of the great caricaturists of America, Ed Sorel, once said, if I want to draw carrots, I go get a bunch of carrots. Needless to say, for an editorial cartoonist, I don't often have to draw them. However, I was doing some freelance work for Organic Gardening magazine, so carrot-based humor became a necessity, and I will just finish this. See what a carrot looks like, of course, and then finish it off. I don't usually draw standing up with my back to an audience, so forgive me. What do they look like? And there we have. I chose something pretty easy to draw, let's face it. But still, it's important to get little things right. Like, look at the little hairs at the end of the cartoon, or the end of the carrot. That's important to get your carrots right. So there you go. Carrot-based humor. Ta-da! And we don't just draw carrots, of course, but I always liked drawing people and natural objects. And when I got started, I had trouble with man-made objects, and especially buildings. An architect friend of mine, David Cronrath, gave me the great advice. He said, relax, caricature them. Caricature everything. And I tried to keep that in mind, and it came in very handy when the Supreme Court decided that corporations are people too. So how does one draw the corporate personhood? Well, here's the Supreme Court Guide to Evolution. I got to caricature fish, amphibians, primates, humans, and now our highest life form, the corporation. And of course, I just had to look out the window at the Comcast tower to figure out which building to choose. Unfortunately, when I was first getting started out in San Jose, I totally ignored all this advice and brought my old images of Philadelphia to California. My editor came in one day and said, Signe, you are not drawing California houses. You are drawing Philadelphia row houses. California doesn't have row houses. So if this is what a California house might look like, this is what, whoops, I was drawing. Oh God, this is just so hard, standing up and backwards. And of course you can't see a thing, can you? So that's great. We'll have the steps coming up, and we'll have the two windows, and we'll have a window box if we're lucky. And just to make it real, we'll have the little grate down here, and we'll have litter on the street. So clearly that does not work in California. Also in California was technology, which I had to pay attention to. This is 1983, when Apple introduced its sleek, new, modern personal computer called Lisa. And that was the first time I remember drawing a computer. And of course now, a cartoonist has to keep updating technology as well as everything else, because to draw Lisa, nobody would recognize it today. But I incorporate laptops and cell phones in a lot of drawings, which look more like this. Let's go out tonight. We've got someone watching the kids. The NSA. The last time I cartooned an Apple product launch was in 2007, when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. Of course, I had to draw. It's all magic to me. I'm still astounded. I was astounded at Lisa, and this is even more so. I had to draw the iPhone, but I also had to draw Steve Jobs, who is a genius, or was a genius. We all recognize that, but he did not dress well for cartooning. This is one of the richest men in the universe, or was, and look how he dressed. Billionaires should not dress like this. It's an insult to anyone who has to caricature and make any indication of wealth. This is how a rich person should dress. Unfortunately, this rich person was drawn in the 1860s by the famous cartoonist Thomas Nast, and no self-respecting billionaire would dress that way now, although their heads might be similar. But getting back to buildings, there are other ways of indicating wealth in modern society. I don't see any income inequality. Me either. So you can see I've learned a whole different way of drawing buildings. Now, people really, when they think about stereotyping, they usually think about, okay, it's got to be about race, sex, nationality, or religion. And each of those have deep and varied histories with stereotyping. And each could take a whole day of TED Talks and should, but I don't have the time, fortunately, to try to even begin to unpack them here. But what I will say is it's not just the big obvious groups that want to have a good self-group image. All groups want to be seen positively. And again, I learned this way back in California at the start of the AIDS epidemic when local gay activists and the conservative Christians out there were sort of going at it about how to deal with this horrible new epidemic. So I drew this. Fundamental sex ed. Does the stork bring AIDS and herpes too? Well, I expected to get some calls from local people, but the call I didn't expect to get was, hello, do you know that all teachers are not old, fat, and carry rulers? And she was right. I, again, had taken my old images and put them in a modern cartoon. And I've done dozens of teachers since, dozens of different kinds of people, but they all wear comfortable clothing and sensible shoes. Here's another one. What's the core of the core curriculum? A good teacher. Oh, excuse me, that was an editorial comment. So, cartoonists can change, and we do change. We try to keep up, keep fresh. But we will not stop drawing about groups' bad behavior. Groups like the NFL, the Ferguson Police Department, or the Islamic State cannot control their own images when they act abominably. They need cartoonists. It's the cartoonist's job to bring out these, their behavior. And it isn't the cartoon's problem. Cartoons are ink on paper. They cannot knock out a woman in an elevator. They cannot shoot an unarmed teenager dead. And they cannot decapitate an alleged apostate. So my advice to groups that want to keep a good self-image is that they'll do okay if they do not, if they don't want to be seen as violent thugs, they shouldn't do or condone violent thuggery in the name of their group. And with that, I will finish and simply say that it's not just cartoonists, but it's all of our job to keep our eyes open and to keep the images fresh, relevant, and real. And with that, I am going back to my drawing board. Thank you.